Hello, everyone. For today's encouragement, I want to take you to Matthew chapter 5 and verse 5. And the title I would give this encouragement is, Meekness is No Weakness. We're going to look at chapter 5 and verse 5, and the verse says this, Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The Greek word that is translated meek may also be translated gentle or humble or considerate or courteous. The word is in contrast with what we usually think of when we think of a meek person. In our culture, when we hear that man is meek, we usually imagine him to be somebody with drooped shoulders and refusing to look you in the eye, somebody who is just a mama's boy, that sort of thing. Meekness, as Jesus uses the word, is a strong internal conviction that leads a person to be gentle and humble and considerate and courteous because they are in total control of all their emotions. That's why a person ends up being meek. Such total control will result in an attitude that is always appropriate. And words that are spoken and responses that are given were always measured and always right on target. Or anger that is a result of righteous indignation and not a flying off of the handle. That's what a meek person does, and that's how his attitude comes across. In the King James Bible, there is a translation that reads like this. Now the man, and the man's name, was very meek above all the men who were on the face of the earth. You know who that man was? The most meek man on the face of the earth? That meek man was Moses. Moses, the man who confronted Pharaoh. Does that sound like meekness to you? The man who ascended the mountain and brought the 10 Commandments down for the people to hear and to obey. Does that sound like meekness? A man who parted the Red Sea and made manna fall from heaven. A man who is described as above all the men who are upon the face of the earth. He was meek. Contrast that meekness of Moses with what we commonly think of as meek people, and we end up on a meekness is no weakness scale. When you look at what Jesus did, and he certainly was a meek man, you realize that Jesus himself was one with great personality and one with great manhood who always was in control of his emotions. J.B. Phillips describes Jesus as a man who had such personality that he walked unscathed through murderous crowds. A man so far from being a non-entity that he was regarded by authorities as a public danger. A man who could not be moved to violent anger by shameless exploitation or by smug complacent orthodoxy. A man of such courage that he deliberately walked in what he knew would be certain death, despite the earnest pleas of well-meaning friends. Jesus was meek, and he demonstrated meekness. Meekness is no weakness. That's meekness on the part of the God-man Jesus. Biblically speaking, it is hardly a weakness. The specific blessing that comes on the man who is weak, Jesus says, is he will inherit the earth. Only a genuinely meek man will be content in stormy situations, be under control, be content because they demonstrate meekness. His ego is not inflated. He must always have the last word. He is someone who is always possessing maturity in his heart and his mind, having nothing, as Paul says, yet possessing everything. That's 2 Corinthians 6, verse 10. His meekness reveals a contentment in every situation and satisfaction with whatever he possesses. I'm okay. A meek person says, this will be okay. A meek person thinks. I read about a pastor in India who was confronted by an angry man in one of his days when he was in his office. The man made some very unfair and untrue accusations against the pastor. After finishing his angry outburst, the man asked the pastor what he had to say. Well, in response, the pastor demonstrated meekness when he got up from his chair, walked into the washroom next door, filled an empty basin with water, and came back into the room. The angry man was surprised when he saw the basin of water and asked, "What's that for?" The pastor replied that even though the accusations were not true, that since the person was nevertheless upset with him, he felt the right thing to do was for him to ask forgiveness and then offered to wash the man's feet. That's a demonstration of meekness. It's a demonstration of strength, not weakness. Everything is under control in his attitude, his mind, his heart, and his words. Blessing came when the man broke down, the story goes, broke down and confessed his desire to trust the same Christ that this pastor committed himself to. Matthew 5, verse 5 says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Meekness is no weakness. May you know that blessing today.